Hi everyone. Time for another sort of Milano update. I've been working pretty hard at things over the last couple of weeks. Quite a few things have gotten done. So let's have a look at what I've done. Um, Put the fuel tank back in. Replaced all of the hoses with all new, including the filler neck hose. Installed that and everything. And then while I was at this whole fuel tank thing, I figured I'd try to re-engineer things a bit because I know the Milano is a bit of a pain in the ass to fulfill all the way. Like at the best of times, with the car sitting at just the perfect angle, you're able to get it like 7/8 of a tank, but you can never get the thing full. And it's due to the design, of course, of having the fill lower than the top of the tank. They have a drain here, or not a drain, a vent in the top here, which originally was routed wrong. And I know Alpha, it was actually routed below here. Alpha recalled it. And then actually had the hose go on top. But I figured I'd do actually better yet again. So I actually took the very, very top vent. This is actually the very, very top of the tank. Highest elevation. I put a T in the vent line, basically, that goes to the charcoal canister up at the front of the car. And this is like a vapor separator. So I teed that line so that once this fills up to the point where air can't vent anymore, there's still going to be airspace in here. So that will then get teed into the main vent tube that goes to the filler neck. So my hope is that I can then get the tank right full, which would be nice. So once I got the fuel tank in there, I put all the insulation and tar, all that stuff back in there. Good old red tape. There was originally insulation here that was pretty rotten from water and moisture over the years, so I replaced it with just this carbon under padding. It's not too important what it is, as long as you just got something in there. For the noise, I have a fuse panel back here, which I ran a big thick, I think it's a number 8 gauge wire all the way up to the front fuse box. I also ran a whole bunch of spares. I ran 7 spare wires with the rear harness before I put all that insulation back, just in case I want to do something in the future. I know I want to do a remote keyless entry system, and more than likely it's going to sit back here because I don't really want that crap onto the dash. It just becomes a nightmare. So I also want to put a subwoofer in here, so I figured put a fuse box back here. It'll make things a lot easier and safer also. The last thing I want is a car fire. So that's all good. It's all taped up, ready to go. Started insulating the interior again. I got a roll of the skookum looking aluminized tar insulation from my dad. He did his 370 and what was left over. I figured I'd do the areas in the car that could use it. I did you can't even see, but I primed, I coated and primed and painted and sealed the floor plugs, and then glued them in with auto body sealant, and then tarred them over with this insulation tar. So the hope is that those don't actually rot out, which would be real nice. Fair amount of work on that. I've got a big chunk of it on the rear parcel shelf as well. I'll be redesigning the audio sort of brackets and stuff back there, hopefully to get a little bit better sound. Put that piece of insulation back in. You can see my wiring harness there with the big thick wire, and also the spares going to the back for the future. The rest of the firewall insulation and stuff I'm going to put on pretty much right away. I just figured by adding a little bit more sound deadening, the ride's going to be a little bit quieter, a little bit less rattly. You'll hear less road noise and engine noise on the interior of the car, which is nice if you want to go on a nice long drive. And I got it for free, so why not, right? And then I put in the pedal box. I actually painted, disassembled everything, the springs and the mechanisms in there for the clutch helper spring, tore that all apart, re-greased it all with nice high quality grease. Let's have a look. I then stripped and then primed and then painted the brake booster and the pedal box. As you can see, it looks fantastic. Reinstalled the clutch and brake master cylinders, cleaned out the reservoir, renewed all the seals on everything there, so everything there is essentially brand new, and it looks fantastic. After I did that, I taken the brake lines and I painted them with just some I don't know, just industrial alkyd enamel, I guess you could say. And then because the brake fluid had been eating the paint over the years, so that they look a lot better now. Ran them to the back of the car again. That should be fantastic. The next thing I've done is, now that I've gotten this far, it was time to seal all the inner rockers where you can't really access. And I chose a wax-based rust-proofing system, probably the same system they use from the factory. I was originally going to buy a quart of it in liquid and then spray it in there with a one of those like autobody or those undercoating shoots guns. That totally didn't work, and I gave up on that. So I chose aerosol instead. So yeah, I waxed all the front areas here. There's big panels in here. Those are all hollow. Those were all completely done with wax. Rust proofing. The access plugs, as you can see, I took all them out, and then I waxed the entire inner rockers like crazy. I used lots in there. You can't be scared of using too much. It's not such a thing. That rocker, I then removed. If you can even see, there's the inspection plugs in the rear wheel wells, which go basically, one goes into that rear rocker and the other one goes into the wheel arch. I completely filled those with wax. And then with what the factory did, I redid that with rust proofing, rust proofed in here, in that panel, up in the shock towers, up in the rear and the front for that matter. These box sections here, I did them with the rust proofing. As well as the front, I guess you could call them frame rails for the unibody. Those boxes, I've done those, and as well as the torsion bar mounts, did those with wax rust proofing as well. Since we're under here, I've cleaned and painted and everything the brackets for the fuel pump. I have cleaned up all the fuel lines. Obviously, I'm not really fond of car fire, so every rubber hose that I would ever touch on a car, I'd always replace with the correct quality high pressure fuel hose and proper clamps and everything. As you can see, here's the clutch and the brake line that I've run back. They look great when they're painted. Oh yeah, I also waxed in there too, because those things have a habit of ripping off from rust. So yeah, I've been hard at it. It doesn't look like a heck of a lot's being done because it's still an empty shell of a car for the most part. But in reality, these are the baby steps that get you to the end. So once we get more interior going, and actually for right now, I'm rebuilding the wiper linkage before I put that back on. Because hey, it's nice to have nice fast wipers, and if you can take them apart and grease them now, you're way better off. So yeah, we'll grease all that mechanism, put it all back together. I'm going to take apart the wiper motor itself. I did this on my last Milano, and it was really successful. I pulled the motor apart. It comes apart fairly easily. And then there's this gearbox in here with the plastic cover on it. And I just repacked that with a really high quality new grease, and the motor was so much better after that. So it's definitely a worthwhile thing to do that, once every 30 years or so. Once the wiper linkage is done, I'm going to start maybe pulling the suspension stuff out of the boxes, pulling the poly bushings out, and I'm going to sandblast a whole bunch of that, and decide how I want to coat it after I've sandblasted. Probably a coat of Endura primer, followed by either an industrial enamel, either with spray on or paint or brush on or roll on or what have you, or maybe another coating, maybe an epoxy coating. We'll have to see. But yeah, for now, Car's looking like a car again. Slowly but surely.